relationships as the context for sexuality more than men do. However, please don't forget about the phenomenon of casual sex and sex between homosexual partners. Homosexual partners may both also have different views on their sexual desires and sex in relationships in the same ways as heterosexual partners do. Women tend to romanticize their sexual encounters with men, whereas men don't engage in such romantic endeavors. I mentioned sexual plasticity just now. What is it and what does it entail? According to Peplow, women's sexual beliefs and behaviors can be more easily shaped and altered according to their cultural, social, and situational factors. The final gendered pattern concerns the association between sexuality and aggression. In terms of sexuality, men tend to be more assertive and aggressive. They tend to initiate sex twice as much as their female counterparts, and even though females also initiate sex, men still do so twice as much on average. Sexual aggression in the form of rape lies at the extreme level of sexuality and aggression and is mainly an act carried out by males. Little is known about aggression and sexuality among lesbian and gay men, and research on this topic would provide a valuable contribution to our understanding of gender and human sexuality. Students, on that note, let us move on to talk about the problems of sex. Although sex is usually a mutually beneficial act between two people, sex and sexuality have caused and are still causing many problems across different societies around the globe. Let us consider these. But before we do that, let me tell you about what is to come in the next lesson. Lesson 2 of Module 3 will entail early childhood development beyond birth. The idea was to start with sexuality and then move on to the life cycle of human beings. In this next lesson on early childhood development, we'll discuss biological foundations of prenatal development and birth, development during infancy and childhood, and physical growth up to the phase of puberty. Topics of discussion will include motor development in infancy, perceptual development in infancy, the course of physical growth, brain development, and factors affecting physical growth. I hope you are looking forward to learning about what I shall present you in this next lesson. This final part of the lesson will address the problems of sex and sexuality. We'll go on to discuss marginalization and stigmatization, rape and sexual violence as part of general violence in the home. Many people are being stigmatized or marginalized based on their sexualities or their sexual orientations. Before we go into the reasons for why this happens, let us first consider the meanings of the word stigmatization and marginalization. Oxford Languages define the word stigma as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Stigmatization in terms of sexuality is a social type of stigma, usually against people perceived to be non-heterosexual because of their beliefs, identities, or behaviors. It is usually privileged individuals or members of the majority group who are the main contributors to sexual stigmas on individuals of the minority group. Furthermore, it is usually those who hold a higher status in a particular society that determine which groups are deemed unworthy by labeling their specific actions or beliefs. Thereafter, stereotypes are produced that extend on the debilitating effects of the labels placed on group members with non-heterosexual beliefs or practices. Stigma and discrimination against gay, lesbian, and bisexual persons may negatively affect these groups and need to be considered. You may be wondering what the negative effects of stigmatization are. These include the following. It may negatively affect these groups' income, whether they can secure jobs, and the ability to get and keep health insurance. It may lead to poor mental health and coping skills, further leading to possible substance abuse, risky sexual behaviors, depression, and suicide attempts. It may affect a person's ability to have and maintain long-term same-sex relationships that lower their chances for STDs and HIV. The person may need to hide their sexual orientation, hence experiencing additional stress, limiting social support, and therefore negatively affecting their health. The definition of marginalization is the treatment of a person, a group, or concept as insignificant or peripheral. There are many groups that are marginalized today. However, we are focused in this lesson on those marginalized based on their sexualities. Here are a few ways in which these groups of people may be marginalized in society. This may include assuming someone might act in a certain way based on the stereotype of their sexual orientation, denying the marginalized population professional opportunities because of certain aspects of their identities, such as their sexual orientation, derogatory language, and or bullying because of said sexual orientation, finding ways to isolate a person belonging to a marginalized group, for example, leaving them out of a meeting at the workplace, showing the person blatant disrespect based on the stereotype they belong to. Students, we have now talked about stigmatization and marginalization. Let us move on to discuss sexual violence and sexual problems within a couple relationship and the effects thereof. The formal definition for sexual violence includes the following: any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic or otherwise directed against a person's sexuality using coercion by any person, regardless of their relationship to the victim, in any setting, including but not limited to home and work. Another word for sexual violence that I'm sure you all know is rape. Rape is a type of sexual assault that usually involves sexual intercourse or other forms of sexual penetration carried out against a person without the consent of that person. Much research has been carried out to find out why some people rape others, and there are many theories to it. However, there is no single correct answer to it. The negative effects of rape on the victim include those that are physical, mental, and emotional, and other effects that are unique to the victim alone. Physical effects may include bruising, bleeding, difficulty walking, broken bones, STDs, and pregnancy. Mental effects may include post-traumatic stress syndrome or PTSD, depression, suicidal thoughts, and dissociation. There are even more negative effects, and these include emotional effects such as not trusting others, anger, shock, blame, feeling guilty, numbness, a loss of control, fear, and feeling extremely vulnerable. Finally, each victim may have unique symptoms of their own, such as chronic fatigue, shortness of breath, muscle tension, involuntary shaking, and sexual dysfunction when before no sexual problems were experienced. If you've ever been a victim of rape or know of anyone who was raped, do not be scared to seek out help. There are many trained professionals out there who can help a survivor of rape recover fully from the trauma. The statistics of rape are soaring, and we should all work together to curb it. In addition, the effects of having been raped are debilitating, with some persons being able to work through their trauma successfully and carrying on with their lives. But for some, the journey to recovery is not so easy, and sometimes even impossible, especially if no help is sought. Let us, as part of society, be vigilant about rapists out there and try to bring the curve down. Let's now look at our last topic for this lesson, and that would be to consider what happens when sex becomes a problem in a relationship. When a relationship or marriage suffers from not enough sexual relations, it is called a sexless relationship or marriage. When couples have not engaged in sex in the past 6 months at all, or only once or twice, it is called a sexless relationship. When sex falls away in a relationship, there are some negative consequences, including a loss of intimacy, hurt for not feeling wanted or feeling rejected, looking for sex elsewhere, which oftentimes leads to the breaking up of the current relationship. What are some of the sexual problems in a relationship? Sexual dysfunction is when there is a problem that occurs during any phase of the sexual response cycle. It prevents one from experiencing satisfaction from sexual activity. This sometimes happens when certain medications are taken or
Okay.
when age sets in.
No.
An incongruence in a partnership in terms of how often sex should be engaged in. A lack of sexual desire for one's partner or for sex in general for various reasons. Physiological problems as a result of previous sexual trauma, and psychological problems that keep one from successfully engaging in sex. What do you think generally happens in a relationship where sex is absent,
Fun.
especially in a marital relationship or a relationship where the couple once enjoyed good sexual relations and for some reason it stopped? The first step in resolving these issues is to talk to your partner and to determine what the contributing factors are for the problems in your sex life. Communication about the topic may very well aid in resolving issues and motivating the couple to work on their issues in the bedroom. Secondly, if there's a physical problem, it would be well worth your while to see a medical professional who can assist with such issues. There are many products on the market today that assist with sexual dysfunction. Lastly, go and seek more help. Many psychological professionals will be able to assist couples who have sexual problems, and often the sexual problems are a product of other issues, such as mental issues in one of the persons in the relationship. And once these issues are resolved, the sexual relationship is usually also resolved. I hope you learned a little bit more about human sexuality and the psychology of it today. This is officially the end of our lesson. Please check out your summary notes for additional content on the psychology of sexuality, and I will see you soon for lesson 2.
I know I have not completed module 3. Lesson 1 of module 3 is what I really did.
Welcome to lesson 2 of module 3 for your course diploma in psychology. This lesson's title is Early Childhood Development. We will address the biological foundations of prenatal development, how the prenatal environment influences an embryo or fetus, and we will have a look at childbirth and the early life of a newborn baby. I hope you find this lesson informative. A very big welcome to your class today. For this lesson, we have 3 core objectives. Firstly, we will discuss biological foundations and prenatal development. Then I will move on to explain prenatal environmental influences and childbirth. And lastly, we will consider birth complications. Students, this is the start of our lesson. In this first section of the lesson, we'll be looking at biological foundations for a child's development, prenatal development, the process of birth, and birth complications. Let us start this journey with genetic foundations. But before we venture into this, let's consider some interesting facts about childhood development. Infants and young children are affected negatively when they are exposed to significant stresses that threaten their family and caregiving environment. Development is highly interactive, and developmental outcomes are not solely determined by genes. The environment also plays a significant role in development. Attachments to parents are primary. Young children also benefit largely from relationships with other responsive caregivers within and outside of the family. A significant part of the brain architecture is shaped during the first 3 years after birth. However, the window of opportunity for development does not close on the child's first birthday. Severe neglect is as great a threat to development as physical abuse. Young children who have been exposed to adversity or violence do not necessarily develop stress-related disorders, nor do they grow up to be violent adults. To simply remove a child from a dangerous environment will not automatically reverse the negative effects or impacts of such experiences. To become resilient, the child needs good relationships and not necessarily rugged individualism. Did you know about the genetic code? The term genetic code is the term used for the way that the 4 bases of DNA, the A, C, G, and T's, are strung together in a way that the cellular machinery called the ribosome can read them and turn them into a protein. If you are not a geneticist, this information would be a little difficult to understand. So let me explain to you what the function is of the genetic code. To state it simply, the genetic code is the set of rules used by living cells to translate information encoded within genetic material, such as DNA, into proteins. Let us officially start our lesson for today, students. Firstly, we will focus on biological foundations and prenatal development. Let us talk about DNA and the genetic code. Chromosomes are made up of DNA. We've talked about DNA before, so let's consider it a little bit deeper. What if I died in the DNA is a long, double-stranded molecule that looks like a twisted ladder. Each rung of the ladder consists of pairs of chemical substances acting as base.
by watching some of my previous live streams, or actually how I started out doing this is actually in my old recorded videos sections.